Hello crafty friends, it's Donna here from Donna is Playing Paper, and I have a fun game of card sketch bingo to share with you today, with a couple of unexpected twists at the end. The paper that we're using today is called Artsy Print from Paper Rose Studio, and it has 3 sets of 6 double-sided papers, 18 sheets in all. One side has these beautiful jewel-toned feathery designs, and the back is some monochromatic black and white prints. Here's how we're going to play the game. I did a quick Google search of card sketch sites and came up with 6 sites, which I wrote down on my piece of paper. On the left, I wrote how many sketches each site had. I then used an online number generator to give me a number between 1 and 6 to know which sketch to use for the first card. In this case, it was number 5, so that's Sketch Saturday. Sketch Saturday has 726 sketches, so I filled in the number 726 and asked my generator to give me another number. The number that came up was 481, and so I went to the Sketch Saturday website, and this is what turned up. What a great simple first sketch to get us started. When sketches don't have measurements on them, one of my favourite things to do is to use my iPad to stretch the sketch until it's the dimensions of my card. In this case, I'm making a US-sized card, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. And then I just use my ruler to measure the other elements. It's much easier than doing the maths. This sentiment comes from a teeny tiny stamp set called Happy Birthday, Thanks. I'll link it and all of the supplies I used in the information box below. For each of the elements on the card, I'm going to add some backing layers. I've chosen solid cardstock, which matches with the colours on the papers, but is usually a shade or 2 darker. I think that gives a really nice border. And my border is just a 1/16 of an inch all the way around, or about 1.5 millimetres. This card has no tricky layers which need to be levelled up, and so I'm just gluing down the different elements. The hardest thing is making sure I don't stick it on the card upside down. I've added some glitter enamel dots to this card and a few of the other cards as I've gone along. Let's spin that wheel again. This time, we're going to use a Queen & Co sketch, and the number is 19. I found these Queen & Co sketches to be much busier than all of the other sketch websites, and so for this card, I'm going to use some black and white papers. I've cut my front element from the centre of my background paper, just to save a bit of paper, and I've filled in the middle with some scrap so that it doesn't sag. This flower is called Stitching Flower 1, and it has holes that you can poke out for stitching, but I don't want the holes today. I'm going to stamp the words Just Because from a stamp set called Into the Woods, and then also add a couple of silver branches from the Ella's Garden Scribble Leaves dies. This is a really old set that I've had for years. I don't want those little stitching holes to fall out, and so you'll notice that I'm putting tape all the way to the edges. If you choose an element that doesn't have the little holes, that wouldn't be quite so necessary. But basically, I have glued every little stitching hole in place on the back. Remember our sketch? It has a banner element behind the circle at the top of the card, and so I've chosen to do the same banner for both the sentiment and also behind the circle. When I finished this card, I wasn't sure about it. Perhaps it's busier than my usual or something, but I had a friend walk past my craft room and fall in love with it, and she claimed it before I even had it glued down properly. It was a good reminder to me to keep on making lots of types of cards. Number 6 is telling us to head over to case this sketch. Number 293, a perfect sketch for highlighting these beautiful papers. I'm not going to show you much of this. It really was that simple. I've chosen one of my favourite papers and put a banner across it, and then I'm going to make a little flower with the Etched Flowers dies. I've glued the 2 layers of this die together, and added the centre. I'm going to use the same just because sentiment as the previous card. I've placed my pieces of background paper either side of the circle and just popped my sentiment down on them with some glue to pick up my background layers. And then as a final touch, I'm just going to curl up the petals of that flower. There is no more perfect sketch for one of these papers than the one that's just about to appear here. Case this sketch, number 126. Look at that gorgeous floral bouquet in the top left corner. This paper is absolutely made for it. I'm going to add my frame using one of the lots of rectangles frames. And I'm also going to cut my sentiment in half so that I can stretch it down the card. Because this is a black sentiment on white cardstock, I'm going to use a black marker. Anything except a Copic marker would do here, just to go around the outside. No card could be simpler, and I think it's gorgeous. Next, we have Mojo Monday, sketch 369. And this is a tall and skinny sketch. And normally, I might have stretched this to become a slimline card. But while I was making these cards, we were about 10 days away from moving out of our home in Japan and moving back to Australia. So I'm not going to stretch the measurements and do the maths. My brain, as you'll see a little bit later in the video, wasn't really up to numbers very much. I have a die that was perfect for this card called Card Creator 2. And I cut a couple of these from burgundy cardstock and glued them together. Then I fussy cut, still using the die, 3 of the different feather elements. The card size was eyeballed. I laid that little element down onto my card, worked out what kind of margins I wanted on the left, and then just sliced a slimline card in half. You can see that the sketch has a different colour on the right hand side. It's obviously designed to put in a patterned paper. And so I tried a couple of papers here, first of all a bold one, and then a much lighter paper. But in the end, I didn't like either of them more than a plain white right hand side. And so that's what I went with. As I often say, we're the boss, not the sketch. Then it was simply a matter of gluing down my tall frame and popping my little feather elements into the gaps. I used my pokey tool to push those edges down flat. For the sentiment, I once again chose that Happy Birthday Thanks stamp and stamped the thanks on the right hand side where the banner element was on the sketch. And I added an accompanying sentiment saying you're the best. Once again, I went around the outside of this with my black marker and I've popped that up with some black foam tape. And right about here is where things start to get very interesting. Queen & Co. sketch 49 came up. It's a great sketch, but it's on the same page as sketch 47, and somewhere in amongst all of the brain fog, I made sketch 47, so I hope you enjoy it just as much. The main elements for this sketch are the frame and the beautiful bouquet at the bottom. I'm going to make my bouquet all in one rather than adding individual flowers, and I'm using the Spring Blossom metal die. I've cut the framework from white card, and now I'm adding a bunch of foam tape to the back, enough to cover every hole, so that when I inlay, the pieces in each of the holes will stick and not go anywhere. Once I've done that, I'm going to cut the die again, this time from a really richly coloured part of my patterned paper. And luckily for me, this came out all as one piece. Because I've put double-sided tape behind my white frame, each of those holes is sticky. And so I can just line up the 2 dies and press down into each of the holes, and each of those pieces will stick. The frame itself won't stick because it's resting on the white card, and so when I've pressed everything in, I can just peel away the frame and all the work has been done. I've made my frame by taping together a couple of dotted rectangles dies. Once I have my paper cut to size and the frame glued down, I'm going to peel back the backing on that double-sided tape, and I will have effectively made a sticker that I can just press down in place. My sentiment is going to stretch right across the top, and so I've put a bit of scrap paper there so that it doesn't sag in the middle. This So Thankful For You sentiment comes from a pack called All Occasions Sentiment Strips. This next sketch, number 172 from Case This Sketch, really had me stumped. It's not a difficult sketch, with just that one element, so I'm not sure why. But in the end, I decided rather than a diamond with extra bits coming out of the edges, that I would go with a hexagon and that I would make a shaker element. So that's what I did. I cut a bunch of hexagon frames using 2 stitched hexagon dies taped together, and then I found a favourite place on what you can probably see was my favourite paper by now, and I cut the larger of the frames from that. I also had some scrap packaging acetate around the house, and I cut the larger hexagon from that as well. Altogether, I layered up 3 hexagon frames, followed by my acetate hexagon, followed by my gold shimmer paper top hexagon. And now I have a little window. I've put some clear crystal shaker mix into that and closed the lid. In the end, once I'd made my decision, the card came together very quickly and easily, and it has a fun shaker element. Now for something completely different, we have a My Favourite Things sketch. This one is number 316, and it's a beautiful simple sketch. I've chosen one of the papers, and I'm going to cut out and pop up a section of this paper to make the circle element. I've also cut a circle of black paper that's very slightly larger so that it will border it. I've glued a piece of scrap paper back into the hole that was left from cutting out my circle so that nothing sags. And then it was simply a matter of replacing that top element and adding my borders. I made my decisions on borders bit by bit, and so I ended up doing this in a little bit of a strange order. I could have been a bit more efficient, but we got there in the end. I'm cutting little fishtails at the ends of my banner by cutting in on the centre and then cutting diagonally in from each corner. That helps me to get a more even end to my banner. Once again, I'm going around the outside with a black marker and then popping that onto the card. You can spot the little black pieces of paper at either end on the back that I've put on to keep everything level. This next sketch is from Mojo Monday, and it's number 524. Mojo Monday sketches are great because they have dimensions already written onto them. And given my ability to even remember a single number, I've definitely decided to make an American-sized card for this one and just copy the measurements given to me. I've cut the circle from the very centre of a piece of pattern paper, which hurt me to do until I realised that I was still going to be able to use the rest of the paper as a background on a different card. The 2 panels sit on the card offset, and so I'm going to need to pop up the top and left-hand side of that top panel by 2 layers of paper, which is exactly the height of the bottom layer. When it comes to adding the diagonal stripes, I've cheated and used a shorter piece of paper, and I'm just using another strip to line them up so that they look like one strip of paper. My circle also has 2 layers of paper on the right-hand side to level it up. I left this card without a sentiment. It can always be added later or be given with just a message on the inside. I couldn't believe my own eyes when I saw I'd done this, but I've done it again. This next sketch is Mojo Monday, sketch 298, and here I am, happily making sketch 287. I really don't know what happened. I must have been way more stressed about moving countries than I even realised. Once again, I've done my trick of blowing it up on my iPad until it's the correct size, and then matching my pieces to the image. Speaking of blowing up photos, this was taken right near my house in Japan, and on the walk to the shops, we had no car, we could see Mount Fuji on a clear day. As I work, I'm popping those pieces onto my iPad to check for size. This feather die is one that I have been waiting to use in this set of cards from the first card, and now finally here's my chance. I just squeezed it out of some leftovers from a previous card. With all of the beautiful feathery designs on these papers, I felt like this was a perfect match. I also prepared a piece of scrap cardstock with double-sided tape on both the front and the back. This double-sided tape is initially repositionable, so I don't have to worry too much, and it will become permanent. I've cut another feather and then peeled back the sticker layer on the front and then the back of this to attach the coloured feather and then to attach it to my card. I've just made a groundbreaking editing discovery. I can put the picture in the corner. I'm going to do that from now on, but this is the last card for today. In order to make those curves on the left-hand side, I've chosen 2 very large circle dies and just partially cut. When layering up the elements on this card, it's going to have a decided lean to the right unless I fix that with my layers behind. And so the longer rectangle has a couple of sheets of paper, and the rectangle with the feathers on it has foam tape so that the whole thing will sit nice and level. This happy birthday sentiment comes from the Rainbow Poppies Sentiments pack. So there you have it, 10 random sketches, 10 incredibly random cards, sometimes even random when compared to the sketches, all from one paper pack, and I have plenty left over. I hope that you've enjoyed this set of cards. I'm leaving you here with some photos of all 10 cards. Feel free to like and subscribe to see what's coming next. And I'll be back soon with another video. Bye for now.